a precautionary, proactive approach means that we take certain precautions to mitigate these exposures when we can. Economic interests are so strong that that's not being done. What you saw in those days, and you see it today, is that every time there's a kind of interesting biomedical or scientific breakthrough or experiment that raises some interesting questions, there was no follow-up. There was no pursuing this to find out what was really going on. And the best example of this is the blood-brain barrier. In 1975, Alan Fry published some papers showing that fairly low levels of microwave radiation could alter the permeability of the blood-brain barrier. What that means is that chemicals that are flowing through the blood vessels in the brain could cross the barrier into the brain. And stuff that shouldn't be in there gets in there. One of the classic effects of microwave radiation is reported in the early literature from the Russian and East European countries is headaches, troubles, mood swings, trouble sleeping. Maybe it's not because the chemicals crossing the blood-brain barrier, but hey, that's a good place to look. Now, that's 1975. Today, we're 32 years later. What is one of the hot button open questions on the effects of microwaves? The blood-brain barrier. It is still not settled. There is not a stitch of cell phone research going on in the United States as we speak. There are three major players here: the electric utility industry, and generation and distribution, transmission of electricity. Then there's the communication industry, basically, and that includes both the Ma Bell equivalents of today, plus the wireless companies. The third element, which is kind of hidden, but is the biggest player of all, believe it or not, is the military. And their contractors, and we know these people by the Eisenhower phrase, the military-industrial complex. So these people overshadow everything else. I guarantee if you took a microwave meter to a modern aircraft carrier or a destroyer or any of these things, and you had the standards which are suggested by today's data, you'd have to put these things in mothballs. And of course, that's not going to happen. And and the reason the military-industrial complex is so strong in this area is to make sure that never happens. First of all, there are practically no enforceable standards in the United States at all. Certainly for power lines, the one standard, the enforceable standard for exposures is for microwave ovens by the FDA. But everything else basically is done through the IEEE. It used to be done, actually, the IEEE took over from the US Navy, who used to do this, but they sponsor a standard setting committee. The IEEE standard is basically was written by the users of this technology, the military and their contractors in the communication industry. Let me put it this way, the co-chairs of the committee that wrote the most recent standard, one works for Motorola and the other works for the United States Navy and the Air Force. So, enough said, as they say. They guaranteed that what came out would be in the best interests of these companies. One of the things the cell phone companies don't want you to think about is that maybe different frequencies have different effects. If that's true, that means they have to test every frequency that they want to use, every signal. Well, they don't want to do that. They want a blanket authorization to any signal, which is basically what they have now. But it's like telling the chemical companies or drug companies, oh, it's just like the other one, go ahead and put it on the market. Well, that would never fly for chemicals, but it is the way business as usual for electromagnetic fields. So there's a complexity here that is hidden from public view. Some of my biggest fights are not with the military-industrial complex, but from the National Institutes of Health. The NCI, National Cancer Institute, their own study shows a link to childhood leukemia from power lines. Yet they have never been willing to admit it. NCI went in, a lot of public pressure to do the study. They did the study, and hypothesis was 3 milligauss. That is, you will see a link to childhood leukemia at 3 milligallows. They didn't see it. They saw the link at 4 milligallows. Remember, the standard's at 1,000. But they saw it at 4. Hypothesis was rejected. They have never admitted there is a link at 4 milligallows. You know, the whole question of whether children are more at risk from cell phones is still a hot button issue. But it's again one of these unresolved issues that no one wants to really settle. I mean, in a way, it borders on criminal at this point, because the companies are marketing these phones to younger and younger children. We don't know about cell phone risks, and until we do, maybe we should limit the exposure of the children. We're surrounded by these fields, and you're going to tell me that we're obviously a chemical body, but we're also an electromagnetic body. You're going to tell me that all these fields have no effect on me? Not likely. The press has not reported on these long latency tumor effects. I mean, you know, as I've reported any number of times, it's front page news in Europe. It is not even in the back pages here in the United States. I mean, it is totally ignored. But the institutions, the environmental groups, the consumer groups, the labor groups, the conservation groups, they're all silent. So it's a complicated business, and the take-home lesson is, if you don't want to find the answer, you will not find the answer. And that's what's been going on for 30 years. The science is complicated enough, but when you overlay the politics, you're in big trouble.